Johnny watching Free Speech TV in Lamarck, Texas. Hey, Johnny, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. I've got a technical/legal question for you. It's based on a comment you made several times in the past about the three branches of government, the legislative branch being the ultimate power, the ultimate authority, and that they're the final law if they agree. And I interpreted that to mean if they voted on a piece of legislation at a supermajority level, and my interpretation being at least 7 out of 10 legislators voting in favor of it. So here's my question. Couldn't a supermajority, or my idea of a supermajority, vote on a piece of legislation specifically aimed at removal of 1 or 2 Supreme Court justices? I'm thinking specifically of Gorsuch and Clarence Thomas, because even if the Democrats take back all 3 branches, we still have too many problems that aren't going to be resolved if we don't also have the Supreme Court back to something reasonable.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, or I understand certainly the motivation of what you're saying, Johnny, and rigging the court is exactly what Mitch McConnell did last year when he refused to consider Merrick Garland's appointment by President Barack Obama. It was insanely disrespectful of our first black president. It was insanely partisan. It had never been done in the 240-year history of this country. And Mitch McConnell has not been held to account for it by the Democrats. And they should have been screaming bloody murder for the last year of the Obama administration. And they should continue to be screaming bloody murder, calling Gorsuch an illegitimate member of the court. 2 points in response to what you said. Number one, it pretty much doesn't matter how many people voted for a piece of legislation, at least from the point of view of the Supreme Court. For example, the Voting Rights Act, which was renewed by Congress a couple of years ago, and I don't remember the exact year, but it was during the Bush administration. The Voting Rights Act was voted, it was 98-1 or 98-0. I mean, it was virtually unanimous. I'm pretty sure it was 98-1, and in the Senate. And yet, the Supreme Court, under the administration of Antonin Scalia, went in and said, those guys only voted for it because they were afraid of being called racists. We're not afraid of being called racists, so we'll just take it apart. And, and there's no problem with discrimination in America anymore. Lyndon Johnson fixed that with his laws back in the 60s, like the Voting Rights Act, and it's worked so well, we don't need it anymore. That was actually, that was the essence of their decision. So when the Supreme Court makes these kinds of decisions, and I would say that one of the most egregious ones that they have made in the last couple of decades was devastating, was gutting the Voting Rights Act. When the Supreme Court makes those kinds of decisions, the only legal response, the only constitutional response that we have is impeachment. And I think that Clarence Thomas's ethical lapses, particularly his wife's with regard to the Heritage Foundation, and Thomas himself with regard to the Koch brothers and going to their events, and Neil Gorsuch being an illegitimate member of the court, these are things that actually are worthy of impeachment of Supreme Court justices. And I would hope that if the Democrats take the Senate and the House, because the impeachment has to originate in the House and then the trial is held in the Senate, if they do that, that they would consider impeaching some of these Supreme Court justices who are, in my opinion, are not on the bench legitimately. Johnny, thank you for the call and raising the issue. Unfortunately, supermajorities, only count to break filibusters.